Good afternoon. Welcome to the Engineering and Construction webinar series. I am your host, Eric Mucklow, and with me today again is Brian Clark from the Construction and Engineering Research Lab. Today we will be talking about the Recommissioning University. You will recall a couple months ago we had a webinar also by Brian on commissioning and retrocommissioning. And today we'll talk about how you can learn more about retrocommissioning through the Recommissioning University. Our topics today will include an overview of the retrocommissioning process, a description of the blended approach to learning as applied to retrocommissioning, an overview of the Recommissioning University website and main features. We'll focus on the first 10 retrocommissioning skills, HVAC Fundamentals specifically, as well as Psychrometrics and timelines and end goals for the Recommissioning University completion. Brian Clark, our presenter, is a mechanical engineer focused on retrocommissioning and HVAC controls and energy efficiency research and development projects. Prior to that, Brian served as DPW engineer at Presidio, Monterey, and Fort Irwin Army installations. His work on energy management at Army facilities contributed to several awards, including Secretary of the Army Energy and Federal Energy Management Program Awards, including multiple publications through the Public Works Digest, and was the focus of his master's degree in Sustainable Systems Engineering. Brian has also served as the USACE Design Branch Engineer and a forward deployed Army Vehicle Mechanic. So with that, I will turn it over to Brian to take it from here.
Good afternoon, everybody. I just want to thank everybody for coming to the webinar today. Really, I do mean that. I've been about my 7th year in the federal government. Like many of us, I spent the first 2 years an intern, doing a lot of training, and I know what it's like to commit your time to something like this, to some learning environment where you don't know what you're going to get out of it. A big reason why I'm here today and why I made this website is that I had one class that I felt like really nailed it on every front, and it had a big impact on me professionally. So in 2012, I took a year-long workshop at the Pacific Energy Center at PG&E in California that was really focused on EDCX or RCx. It was run by 2 instructors. One was the lead that ran a really tight ship to make sure that everybody had the requisite Excel and HVAC skills to be able to be in this class and keep everybody going where they need to go. And the other one was kind of the field guru who had almost 4 decades of experience in the field with commercial building systems. And it really had a profound impact on me to understand how to operate buildings better, and a lot of my work in the past couple of years has been trying to recreate that experience for the Army. So it's been a big focus for me, as Eric said, from some PW Digest articles that we wrote, some awards that we've gotten from FEMB and Secretary of the Army, and just some work that I've done at my last installation at Presidio with this stuff into action. But a big moment for me was when I was part of the effort to really try to give this to the Army in the form of a practicum. So it's been a couple years since we started the Army RCx practicums. This is the first one in 2014, and we got very good feedback where we were trying to meet our requirement for RCx in the field while inviting folks from DOD that are somehow related or tied to RCx work to kind of come and learn from some of the commissioning agents that we had there helping us, and kind of make it a teaching environment as we're meeting that requirement. So one of the feedback that we got is while it was a very good training, is that it was really a lot. We were trying to really shove everything that was good about that year into this 1 week, and it definitely had the feeling of a fire hose type training. So the next year when we hosted the second practicum, we moved a lot of the lessons up front before the practicum, before that 1 week on-site portion, where we were really able to focus more on the field work. So we found that was a really successful way to do it, and then the kind of evolution from that is moving toward this more blended style of learning for the practicum. So we kind of stumbled upon this, but other folks are doing this. If you ever heard of Khan Academy, this is a guy that started out helping some family members via YouTube with math problems, and really kind of exploded from there, where now there's a website where for a number of different LHI subject matter you could go and look at these videos and do these practice exams, and it's really a different way of learning that I think is really a good fit for something like RCx. I have a website up right now. It's still in many ways in development, but it's live. And as of this week, I'm going to keep it live. I think there's enough on it to make it useful as it is, and I've cleaned up the broken links, and there's a few resources and videos and exercises up. So I'm going to go through that overview, but I'm calling it RCxU or RCx University, and it's really meant to offer that blended learning to support something like an RCx practicum, or just be something like that initial exposure and reach back before and after the class, to have a place, this kind of one-stop shop where you can have resources for different things with HVAC Fundamentals and RCx skills. So this is what one of the pages might look like when you're looking at the lessons. You might have a 5 or 15-minute video on a specific sub-lesson in the different categories that we call the 10 skills. And after a couple of those videos, then there'll be a practice example where you're putting some of it into play, and it'll give you instant feedback on the website. So this is an example. I'll just flip back and forth where, after learning about the site chart, it's asking you to plot some points on the site chart. But this is one of those examples where every class I go to that has any kind of HVAC kick to it, usually it's advanced HVAC, but this kind of stuff still has to be covered as a refresher. So this is a lot of heavy work. It doesn't have a lot to do with the class, but it has to be set up. So the website can kind of function as doing some of that heavy lifting. But I think there's more potential too with setting up RCx, having it be a supplement to that kind of training, or really building up a program around this, and I'll get into that today. So these are the kind of topics I think that I can cover in the next 40 minutes or so. Is after getting a little bit into what RCx is, I'm assuming that there's some background knowledge on the call, but I'll cover some major points. I'm going to go over kind of what went into building this website, and then where I see the short and long-term value of RCxU. So we'll kind of start with backing up just what I mean by RCx. So there's a lot of terms that we could define with RCx. I know that the last webinar, there was a really great hour on total building commissioning. So it's very much related to total building commissioning in that there's a lot of the same testing and analysis skills involved, but it's different in the sense that commissioning is really a quality assurance process. It's about verifying that some building performance requirements that was scoped out has been met. Now, contrast RCx against that as really being about building optimization. You're not constrained by necessarily a design or an initial contract. It's about seeing the systems that you have and finding a way to make those buildings work, optimize it for energy and comfort. We can talk a little bit about what recommissioning and retrocommissioning means. There's actually a little bit of differing opinions in the industry that I could define, but really, whether it's recommissioning, which typically means a second or an additional commissioning event from what was done initially, or retrocommissioning where there was no commissioning done at all, it really doesn't change the process itself about what you're doing with the existing building. So it's really a way to query the building. Some people call it having a dialogue with the building, where you're using these on-site testing and analysis processes to try and find RCx opportunities. And I've listed a couple here. There's no real standard checklist. I think that really the goal of RCx is to, by first understanding the HVAC at play and doing some benchmarking to understand where the energy drivers are, then going in and scoping to determine what type of in-depth testing and analysis needs to be done, and then following up with the different energy and ROI calculations that you need and finding a good route to implement that work. But the actual implementation is not RCx specific. So you might find that there's a building that doesn't have a supplier temperature reset. That's an RCx opportunity, but there's many ways that we currently have contract vehicles and skill sets to implement a control sequence change like that. So there's some RCx supporting, there's some mandates supporting RCx. VISA 2007, where the energy and water evaluation requirements are. There's some built-in requirements as part of that 4-year cycle to have the energy managers perform those initial RCx assessments. And there's been some follow-on guidance, but it's been pretty light. There's not a prospect course to support RCx. There's not some of the guides like there are for energy and water evaluations, and there's not really some of the cyclical support from headquarters for things like the EACA and the EAP and the REMS to be able to come out and do these. So there's some support, but I would say it's been limited relative to some of the other mandates that are in that document. So I'm going to kind of leave off for that for any more detail about RCX. I had a webinar, as Eric said, a few months ago that gave a lot of examples about what RCX looks like in the field. And if you go to the sustainability website, you can check out that webinar. But I will leave off with this idea of the tree of low-hanging fruits. And I cited some statistics in that webinar about what the benefits were in a lot of industry studies, both energy and non-energy. And I would just I've always been, for the past couple of years, trying to argue that a lot of the low-hanging fruit in the form of simple lighting fixes and simple HVAC scheduling, a lot of that, I think there seems to be a consensus that a good amount of it, not all of it, but a good amount of it is plus. And then there's some high capital things we can do at the top of the tree, like renewable energy systems, cogeneration, deep energy retrofits. And those are great, but there's a lot of existing buildings that I think need a process like RCX to act as that next generation of low to medium hanging fruit. You just need to have the skills to know where it is, because it's a little more hidden, I think, than some of the other fruit on that tree. So what are the right skills? So that was a big kind of driving question when we were teaching this at the practicum and then in deciding how to set up this website. The website's really built around these 10 skills. So I'm going to go over what some of those lessons look like, but essentially these are skills that offer the off-site prep for an RCX event, tell you how to do some of that on-site prep, focus on the testing analysis, and then the execution phase of RCX. So there's some basic competencies required, and I'll probably talk a lot more about this first skill than the other skills. So the first skill is HVAC Fundamentals, and I would call this the most expansive and probably essential skill to be able to do RCX. There's just some basic competencies that have to get covered. So I split them into 5 sections here. So I'm trying to follow, sequentially how you might build this material. So when you talk about, when you talk about defining what an HVAC load or process is, you can then talk about saturated systems, and then you can talk about the load management equipment, like boilers and chillers set up to address those loads. And then you want to talk about the pumps that connect those systems together. And then you may look at air side equipment for ventilation and to assist with that load management. And then lastly, HVAC controls that kind of tie all that together. So that's all kind of fit into this one skill. And I've put a lot of time into these lessons more than the other ones so far, because I think this really can act as really its own standalone resource on the website. There's a lot more than just RCX, where I feel like this can be of use in the industry. So when you go to the website right now, this is what you would see if you clicked on that loads and processes. So it gives a little description about what loads and processes are, and then you can see on the right here, this is the kind of set of lessons and exercises. So the little monitor would be a video, and then the pencil would be an exercise. So we start by just defining, assuming that somebody's coming at this really brand new to the HVAC industry. We take terms like loads and processes for granted, but there's some specific ways we may want to define that before we look at things like the psych chart and how to plot states on the psych chart and what that means. I also have a separate video on enthalpy, because it's another one of those kind of abstract HVAC concepts that I felt merited its own 5-10 minutes to discuss. And then you get into tracking processes on the psych chart, so looking at differences in states and understanding how we size loads, what happens when those loads are different from design, and then how you can do both qualitative and quantitative things once you introduce some standard psych charts, or psych equations to look at that psych chart with. So there's some calculation examples, and then a little bit more in depth about how the plant load is related to the zone load, what type of weather resources that you can use to plot on the psych chart and do some more assessment. And then getting into other saturated systems like steam and refrigeration. And then some knowledge assessment at the end just to kind of track that, where the folks taking these lessons are absorbing that material. So that's kind of the basic premise. I'll go through the rest of these pages, and they may get kind of small, but I invite you to go to the website and feel free to give me feedback if you think I'm hitting these in the right order. But this is from being at the practicum, teaching some of this material, especially the HVAC fundamentals, and then thinking about what order you might want to present this material so it really builds and supports being able to go and use this in the field. So with heating and cooling equipment, then once you've talked about loads and processes, then you can start tying that to the actual equipment that's managing those processes. So I start with refrigerant and a vapor compression cycle, looking at the main components, the compressor, condenser, expansion valve, evaporator. I later get into some auxiliary components that you may see in the field and what those look like. The difference between DX and chill water. A little bit on absorption cooling, but not much. So there's definitely some niche technologies in here that I brush on, but I don't think we're going to see as much of it in the field. Like steam heating I don't focus on quite as much as a typical condensing hot water system. But I do get into things like hot gas bypass and things that you may want to be able to assess in the field. Are these good or bad? Or how to identify compressor types, what it means to have different compressor types, and evaluate how many stations your chiller can go at, what that means for the pump operation. And then getting into heating with heat pumps to contrast what that looks like relative to a vapor compression cycle. Different ways you do combustion heating and different configurations for that. How you tune boilers. So some of this is basic energy management, but it's really laying the foundation to then go to some of the next sessions, such as pumping systems. So that's looking at really how pumps are put together, specifically centrifugal pumps, the pump equation, and understanding how flow and head really drive a lot of the operation of our pumps. What that positive suction head is, cavitation, how to look out for that and be aware of it. Some plotting on the pump curves and understanding how to read and use those. Different pump optimization sequences like throttling a triple duty valve versus putting in a VFD versus trimming the impeller. And then going on to look at more complicated systems like primary, secondary pumping systems and how you may assess how those are operating. So we'll start going through these a little more quickly. Like I said, we can go to the website if we have time and maybe click on some of these. But I'm then getting into airside about how both the ventilation and some of the load management is handled by airside equipment, and really having a focus early on what the components are in typical air handling equipment and how you can classify air handlers by the methodology they're using, the equipment type, some of the add-ons, like does it have a preheat coil, does it have an economizer, does it have an enthalpy wheel, what the distribution type is associated with that airside equipment, and then some of the follow-on in-depth equipment like what system spec is in our distribution, how fan curves work, how to use fan equations, how to look at filters and how to optimize our different strategies for filter optimization, and a big focus on economizers since RCx that is such a big point of failure. So can HVAC controls, I've kind of deviated from the way I was taught some of these skills, and I'm making that an HVAC fundamental skill. I think that there just has to be some basic competency about how HVAC systems are put together. So this is getting into the territory where I haven't built this material yet, but I have a good framework for what these videos need to look like, some resources about where I can fill in the gaps, whether I'm going to shoot these videos or whether there's existing resources or presentations that I can pull from. But there's some things that I know are pretty important to have in there that I don't think exist out there, at least I haven't found them. Like the first video as part of this lesson would be dissecting an HVAC controller cabinet. So there's, out of all the training out there with HVAC, controls, there's some good explanations of backnet versus lawn work, and how we've migrated from pneumatics to electric to DDC controllers. But I'd like to take a GoPro into one of my mechanical rooms and I've shot this. I just need to get it up on the website and actually take my finger and point out, that this is a transformer, that this is an expansion pack for a DDC controller, that this is a pneumatic to electric transducer. I think that would have a lot of really dense value to have videos like that up on this website. That kind of rounds up the HVAC, but I don't expect everybody who is interested in learning about RCxU skills to need to go into that depth as a refresher. So one of the things that I thought would be a good idea is if you want to go straight to the skills past HVAC fundamentals, there's an option on the bottom left here for taking a pretest. It'll kind of give you a self-assessment about whether or not you feel that you have these lessons covered, or if there's certain ones you want to go back and focus on before looking at the other RCxU. And those comprise of, and I'll go through these a little bit faster, benchmarking is kind of the first thing I think you would do off-site before you go to a building for an RCX event. So understanding how to benchmark, what the resources are, where the value is for that, of comparing it to similar buildings operating out there, and the different ways to do that. How to use utility billing data, hopefully refined data, to make some conclusions about what the energy drivers are before you even go in the building, and what some of the tools are for that. And a little bit of practice related to that, and then a little bit of info on just utility billing structures. So then getting into scoping, getting into, when you first walk into a building, how you can make some hands-in-your-pocket assessments about what's going right in the building, or what may merit further investigation, what things you may want to flag. System diagrams, so really applying system thinking to be able to, in the field or looking at a sheet of as-built, to be able to simplify the schematic of how systems are put together, so that you can know if you're looking at a primary hydronic system with two secondaries and a bypass on one side, and where that bypass sits on the plant. It can be very helpful to have tools to be able to make those conclusions early, so you can know how to analyze and then optimize the system. So trending, so either using the existing automation system or portable data loggers to trend, and then looking at by unit type, by either whether it's temperature or pressure or electric monitoring, what data loggers, what tools, what instrumentation exists out there to be able to do that, and then kind of setting up what a backpack might look like of tools that you can have to support that. And there's some work here at CERL where we're actually building backpacks so we can get out to districts and get out to installations so they can have tools like hobo loggers and IR guns and ultrasonic flow meters that they can do some of this on their own, or have us come and assist. Functional test is the next skill, whereas trending is really looking at the building performance over time. Functional test is really what you want to do to look at the reaction to change, so some force change or some natural change that you're observing. So an example, this might be a pump test to understand what impeller size you have, where it's sitting on the pump curve, how it may be, how you may be able to improve that. But really just understanding what a functional test is, how to write one, or what resources are available for stock functional tests, or to help you write your own. The data analysis, so what tools, both using Excel and using some other programs that some folks may be familiar with, like the Universal Translator, to be able to perform the data analysis from data you get from your trending and your functional test phases. And then energy calculations. This is actually the longest kind of menu that I have right now, but a lot of this is again, stock and not really tied to RCX, but you need to have the skill to be able to go and take your conclusions from data analysis and then write up what fixes or optimization from those opportunities is what it's going to yield quantitatively. And the flip side of that is ROI calculations, but not just being able to put a number to those savings, but also understanding how to price out some of the work and what the resources are available to that, and how to take advantage of different rebates for different types of work and where you can go to look for that. And then implementation, which to me is really becoming one of the more important skills, because this is maybe not as broad as HVAC, but maybe the second broadest, where you're looking at not just how to get these ECMs implemented, but whether you're doing it in-house, whether you need to contract it, what that scope of work might look like, be able to make sure that you're getting that work done well, whether you're scoping out the RCX itself, if you have gaps there you need to fill, how you do that effectively, but also the controls, whether it's controls work, how you approach that if you're going to do it in-house, who you might need to coordinate with from a stakeholder standpoint, how to address human behavior and how that really fits into the realm of RCX, and then how to do things long-term, like having a service contract or ongoing commissioning, or just setting up an RCX program at an installation or a campus. So I'll go a little bit into kind of how the website was put together. So really the guts of the RCxU website is a web program called Wix, which is really just meant to be an easy, it's one of those like Squarespace type sites where it's WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get interface. So I didn't have to code any of this. I'm kind of building it, with these stock, web features and blocks. And there's also SurveyMonkey, which is really driving the practice exercises and the knowledge assessment. So I'm using an online web survey embedded into the website to be able to facilitate those practice exercises that we've been building. I didn't put it on here, but I'm also hosting the videos on YouTube, so they don't live on the website. There's also a YouTube channel, which is kind of a simpler way, I think, to access some of these lessons that you could search for individually. Also, from a basic approach, like I mentioned earlier, the Khan Academy, Salman Khan, I think really is one of these folks that hit upon a really good way to use technology going forward, especially with technical topics, to do what they call blended learning or flipped classroom. And they call it flipped classroom because what this really facilitates is, instead of having a lecture in class, you can have your lecture remotely, since that's really going to be the same every time, and it's not necessarily worth it for a professor to give those lectures the same way every time when it could be recorded and self-paced. You can pause, go back to it when you need to, and then doing the homework instead of at home by yourself with the instructor. So having on-site support for how you actually apply the lecture material is really, I think, part of the revolution with how we can use technology to improve teaching in general. So another thing that Salman Khan in this book talks about is how there's some studies supporting that, even though I'm talking for an hour, and I realize that especially remotely, that a lot of you are going to tune out, that's really not anything that can be helped, because a lot of the studies in education are showing that there's a 5 to 15 minute attention span that the bell curve shows us most people really have to be able to take in dense material. That's why the videos are really cut into slices like that. You can look at a video that talks about enthalpy for 10 minutes and then stop. And then you can go to a video about using enthalpy, and then it's kind of broken up in those ways. And then having that supplemented with practice exercises that give you kind of instant feedback with whether they're using that information. So I tried to follow some best practices for the actual lessons, which are mainly PowerPoints that we've used in the past to teach some of this material. I'd like to supplement it with different field recordings where necessary. So one of the things that I'll have up in the next few weeks is actually conducting a pump test. So it's one of those things that I think really would benefit and have a lot of value with being online, where you're have a GoPro strapped on your chest, and I'll be going through a pump curve. At the same time, I'll be showing what where on the pump curve, looking at an actual pump curve chart, how those points move around when I close the triple duty valve, and when I'm discussing optimizing, putting a VFD on, what that means, where that actually puts us on the pump curve, and how we can calculate energy from that. And there's also some other presentations out there, some external links I may link to if somebody covers something better than I do at a free website. I think that is worth trying to take advantage of that. There's some best practices with data representation that I had covered as part of my master's program that I'm trying to interject here, and I have some lessons on that from when you're writing up an RCx report or you're doing data analysis about how you can look at that data in different ways to give you value. How to put the website together just from a design best practice. This isn't really my background, but there's resources that kind of help you build a website that kind of matches your application. So I went with what's called a clean look. It's a style of web design, which is really just supposed to be easy on the eyes to help you kind of focus on where you want people to go. It's a Comic Sans font, which is there's actually a lot of science that goes into what font is better for being on the web, for teaching really technical material and having it not be too intimidating. And then just things like having this homepage and having clear direction. There's a lot of smart folks that write about, if you have a business or if you are trying to teach some of this material or draw somebody in right away, how you might do that. So I put a lot of thought into having this homepage really clearly, ask the user, where do you want to go? If you want to know more about RCx, here's a link. If you want to go to the fundamentals portion of this, since it really is, HVAC Fundamentals, kind of its own standalone part of this website, go here. If you want to go straight to RCx skills, push this button. So the site is live, but I'm going to go over, just the kind of limited content that I have on there now, and then where I plan to be at the end of the summer. So really right now I've been focusing my time, now that I have the framework of the website up, and I have a real clear vision that I've put on the website for how these things are pieced together and what lessons need to be fleshed in. It's a matter of getting that content up there. So I would say I'm maybe a third of the way through the HVAC Fundamentals, and I think there's enough up there. Like I said, I'm going to leave it live and just keep adding content and maybe put a blog post on the site when a big chunk of it has been added. But for the most part, all the loads and processes is up there, and I'm most of the way through the heating and cooling equipment. And I think I put a deadline for myself. I had submitted this as an energy exchange presentation. So one of my goals was to have this ready for the energy exchange, for the energy managers and the folks in Incom, so they can kind of see what resources are up on this website and available. And I wanted to have all the HVAC fundamentals up. Since I wasn't selected to be at the exchange, the kind of deadline for me fell away. But after being at the ASHRAE conference, the annual conference in St. Louis a few weeks ago, I met with the technical committee on education, and they had some interest, and they had talked about trying to find a site like this that covers the fundamentals in a way that they can kind of get behind it and recommend it to different users on their website, and as a kind of finding of their technical committee. So I'm going to try to get it up for them at the end of the summer. So that's kind of my new deadline. There's plenty of pages that are going to look like this. So there's no broken links. I wanted this to be kind of a encapsulated site that all the links work. They just may take you to in development pages like this. So if we have time, I think I'm going to finish the rest of the presentation about where I think the site's going, and then if we have time, I can either take questions or I can try and share my desktop and kind of walk through what the live version of the website looks like and how you can click on the different links and what stuff is up right now. But I'll also point out that I think a good use right now that's up there that I'll continue building, but there's plenty of value there right now, is that in this process, both when I first got into RCX, when I was studying some of this in my master's program, and then as I'm building this website, I think there's a lot of good references out there. I wanted to make sure I wasn't doing something that was already done out there, but also to be able to incorporate a lot of best practices from other resources. So I've got about 200 resources that I had compiled and categorized as, is it a certification? Is it a presentation? Is it a report? Is it a guide? Who made it? What's the age of it? So I put this on the website as under the extras page, and it's available for download. I probably need to clean up the shorthand of it that exists right now, but I think there's still value if you go there and you either do a search or you download it and do a spreadsheet, and then you can filter it as necessary. But the Excel spreadsheet has links to where all of this lives. So some of it's pay material, like an ASHRAE guideline, which is a very good one right now, 0.2 on the process for existing building commissioning. It'll take you to the ASHRAE library, but there's plenty of free content that I found out there on public websites that you can go and find a really good LV&L study on RCX, or you can find a NEB guideline on how to implement RCX, or an AEE paper about how to address human behavior as part of RCX. So that's all up there right now, and I think it has good value. But there's bigger things I think this website can offer, and I'll go over that briefly here. So there's another part of the website that talks about a training program. So this is the page that says, I don't think anything I'm going to do with this website can or should really replace on-site learning. I think it should just enhance on-site learning by taking some of the heavy lifting of initial exposure and making it more of a prerequisite to that on-site. So I'm hoping that I can kind of flesh out what an agenda might look like if you wanted to incorporate this into an existing training program. So I'm going to be helping with the prospect course on controls and lawn works. And this is something that as I shadowed the course earlier this year, I noticed that there was a lot of having to go back mid-presentation to explain what an economizer was, because it's introduced, but there's, you may get some blank stares and you have to cover that, or talking about a coil, and then you need to explain a little bit about the science behind a coil and what equations govern that and what the response is. So I think that it can help with existing programs like that, or you could have a standalone RCx program that uses this remote portion as part of that flipped learning. So I've written up what that training program might look like, and I have it as an unfunded request right now into Axum. But not knowing where that might live, whether that would be a prospect course or whether there'd be a different entity best suited to handle that, I've really put a lot of thought into what that class might look like after seeing the practicum that we at the Presidio Monterey had hosted. And I think that one of the best ways to move forward is to really make these knowledge assessments on these different skills, especially HVAC fundamentals, prerequisites to the class. And I think that you can track that, and if you're not getting participation or if you get low scores based on that, that's an indication that the folks that are in that category can use their time in class. You can have computer lab breakout time where they're then going through these lessons if they haven't done that off-site before the class. And the folks that are ready for more of an advanced hands-on portion, so they can actually go, and then that way you can have a class that's a little more tailored so that you don't have people at wildly different competency levels and you're just picking a place on that spectrum to try to teach to. So and it's more than just about that initial exposure. The way that I built this website, and when I talk about it using a web survey embedded into the site, that actually has a lot of power behind it. So because that tracks responses, one of the really cool things that you can do is then you can do analytics on what those responses are. So if you can imagine being a teacher, imagine how powerful it would be walking into a class on day one and or throughout the class, and knowing that that Jimmy is really struggling with pumps, or that as a whole the class understands the fundamentals of flows and processes, but it really doesn't know about HVAC equipment or how the controls work, tying that together. So I think that's where learning in general is going to go on a lot of fronts. But I know from our course, I can see this having a lot of good. I'm hoping that next year, if I can get that funded, that's going to be fully available for different folks in the industry to be able to use. But I think there's some value now with the HVAC fundamentals, both now and at the end of the summer. But as always, I look forward to any type of questions or comments you have. I think I got about 15 or so minutes, so I'm happy to do more of a live demo on the site to show you what one of those lectures look like, or I'll pause here if there's any particular questions.
All right, Brian, I'm going to go ahead and put the links to the prior webinars, the videos, as well as the Mercy site in the chat box. If people have questions, they can go ahead and start typing in the questions there, and I'll read them aloud for the sake of the recording, since the recording doesn't capture that text box, and you can answer them. In the meantime, until we have some, if you want to go ahead and try to pull up your desktop to see if you can show, if you look at the, what is it, fifth? Oh yeah, there's the website there, okay. If you want to show on your desktop, there's the third, what's this? I guess it's the sixth icon. It's a little blue screen, looks like a flat screen TV on the upper left, since you're in presenter mode. You should be able to click that, and it should say, share my desktop. And see if that doesn't bring up a new window for us.
Yeah, maybe you can let me know when you're seeing my screen here. So I hit the full screen.
Okay.
Are you seeing a PDF, or are you seeing the website that I have up now?
No. I'm not. I don't know if anybody else is. Usually it brings up a separate window that comes up.
Okay, yeah, I'm getting that. Yeah, no, I just now got a Java applet.
Okay, here it comes.
Request.
Okay, so it's coming up for me. Basically, I'm seeing a little window, maybe 2/3 of the size of the website screen. Okay, there we go. So I'm seeing it, so I assume that other people can see it.
Okay.
So
yeah, so somebody go ahead and interrupt me if they got questions, but I'll maybe take 5 or 10 minutes to just click through the website to see, what that navigation and what that overall structure looks like. But this is the home screen. So if you were to type in, and I probably should have put this address in the presentation somewhere, but RCxUniversity.org is the website. Like I said, I had been keeping it live and then taking it offline as I've been adding content. And I think at this point on, I'm just going to keep it live because I think there's, while it's in various stages of in development, none of the links should be broken. And I think there's enough there to just have some value. And it's just, I'll just be expanding it, on an incremental basis. But this is the home page. So I try to make a simple interface, as I described, where, when you go here, it'll give you just a couple choices. So there's a menu that follows through on these different screens, so you can go directly to the different 10 skills, or you can go to some of the extras, and I'll kind of cover what those look like. But really, I wanted folks to see, these three options. So either they go straight to the HVAC Fundamentals, straight to the RCx skills, or they can hit this link here. I don't know if you can read it, but it says, what is RCx? So I'll kind of scroll you down to just my very quick summary of what RCx is. Just a one-page, a little bit of a graphical look at what RCx is, why should we care about it, and then there's another link at the bottom for what RCxU is. So then this takes you to a video that I can click that's me kind of walking through the montage of the site.
I don't know if we have the bandwidth to really show the video much, but you can see that there's some screens changing on it.
Okay. I don't know if the audio is coming through or if it's
I can't hear the audio.
Okay. All right. Well, so that's just about a 2-minute video that kind of goes through some slides to indicate what type of content is going to be on the website. And then from here, you can go directly to the 10 skills. So this is an overview. All of these are buttons that you can click to go to the different skills. And then at the bottom, as I said, there's a HVAC Pretest. So if you were to click this right now, it loads up a SurveyMonkey page, so a web survey that is a number of HVAC questions that we had used in our practicum to try to determine where people were on the HVAC competency scale. So one of the things that I know at least Khan Academy does that's really great is they have kind of a randomization machine. They can throw a lot of money behind having a near unlimited amount of questions and then making them random. So right now this is just one test. I can see maybe fleshing that out a little bit, but do people know what the different parts of the pump curve are? Do they kind of understand bin data and how to plot things on a site chart? A couple examples related to that. And then all that will be tracked. So if you were a teacher and you wanted to, ask your students to take a, 15-minute HVAC pretest and know where they are before they, enter into some on-site teaching events, this would be a link that you can use to then determine, where your class is, where individual students are. So here I kind of use it as a self-paced, just to kind of give yourself an indication of whether or not you should skip this. And if you don't, and you click on here, it brings up a kind of separate view of the 10 skills that breaks down the different sub-lessons with HVAC fundamentals that I went over. So if I click on the first line of text here for HVAC loads and processes, that's where you go to this set of videos and exercises that are really meant to be sequential. So if I click on this one here, what is the site chart? This is where it pulls up that YouTube video. So this is all linked to the channel that I have up on YouTube for different videos. So there's some navigation here to go back and forth between the videos, but the idea is, you watch this one about what the psych chart is, what the different labels are associated with it. I know I had to hear that, maybe 5 times before it really sunk in. So I think it's really good to have stuff like that up on a website where you can have reach back. And then there's just immediately some simplified exercises to really kind of hammer in that material, as well as, a number of downloads on the website. So here's one, as you're looking at the site chart, you may want to have a free version of the psych chart available. So for right now, I have this one that's public for SI and IP units. That's a little more of a fleshed out psych chart compared to the simplified version that I have here. But as you step through these numbers, so here it's asking what's the relative humidity at 68 and 55. Let's say I think it's 20%. So it'll tell me if I'm wrong or right, and it'll actually show how you kind of get there by plotting the different lines of wet bulb and dry bulb, and then what relative humidity line is closest to that. And then you just kind of keep stepping through, and there's maybe 5 or 6 questions like that it'll tell you if you're getting them right or wrong. And if I was to add a login portion to this, then this could be tracked. But I had really expected that as you go back to the main loads and processes page, that at the bottom there's going to be a kind of this check on learning that's going to be a larger, as opposed to a couple questions, it's going to combine that into more of a knowledge assessment that then is tracked by teachers or students to make sure that you're picking up the content here. So we can
what level of login tracking is there currently? Because I see you're not logged in right now, but is all the content available? It just doesn't track you if you're not logged in, or how does that work?
Yeah, that's right. So that it's a little bit more of a complicated. I think when I get that, if I can get that UFR funded and make this more of a training program, I'll then have the need to have this support logins and support specific training programs and classes. Because I can envision like what we did with the RCx practicum. You may want to post material about your building or your class on this, and I can see that being a separate part of the website that you use a login for. But right now I'm trying to keep it simple and not have any cybersecurity concerns or questions. So there is a login feature right here, but right now it's not used for anything. So I could probably set it up to just have notifications when new content gets added. But right now I haven't even really touched that piece because I want to keep everything pretty sanitized and clean. And I should also add that there's no content on here that really speaks to any Army facilities. I may use examples from facilities I've been at or projects I've been associated with, but all of that is made generic to buildings, as a whole. There's no names, there's no locations. It's just talking about the science of buildings.
Okay. Again, if anybody has any questions, there's a text box to your lower right on the screen next to a send button. Type in your question there and hit send, and it'll come up on the screen, and I'll read it for Brian's answer, so it's captured in the recording. Otherwise, also, I think the screen display window is over right now, but below the presentation slides, there's a down arrow into an inbox looking icon. And if you click that, you can download, I believe I have both the PowerPoint and the PDF version of the presentation if you want to go back and look at some of those notes or some of those screens that had a very small type on them. Although you can obviously go straight to the website. The website link is on the screen. Have you had any ASIT issues using resources such as SurveyMonkey? I assume it means blocked sites and that kind of thing.
It's interesting you ask, because I've been a big proponent of using resources like SurveyMonkey for a variety of facility management tasks. So I actually talked to Mr. Dalton about this at the MECALEX COP in January, because he was talking about the surveys for the Corps that, this is before I was a Corps employee, still with IMCOM, but he was discussing the surveys that go out in spreadsheet form, which to me, using SurveyMonkey for various things on my base, like there's a leak credit that we have to go for measurement and verification of, or occupant comfort surveys rather, and that they had been handing out paper copies, printing them, collecting them, analyzing them. We just put an *55 appendix thermal comfort survey on the SurveyMonkey, and it made that almost an instantaneous process to send it out, collect it, analyze it. Same thing with barracks utilization surveys that our housing folks were doing. There's a lot of power with SurveyMonkey, but I did go to my IT folks, and their concern was about PII. So is there the ability to enter PII? So it basically talks about, is there multiple choice, or is there also open text field entry? So I think it's open to interpretation a little bit about how crazy you want to get, because I've heard some folks say that if there's even the potential, like if I ask what your favorite color is, and then you panic and put in your social, just having the capacity to put in your social is, there's some restrictions there. But from the way I'm using SurveyMonkey right now, is just for multiple choice field, and that seemed to be okay.
And we've been using SurveyMonkey for some things on our end too, and usually the problem we have with the HIT filters is that it'll corrupt the URL, and it especially doesn't like you to follow links that are forwarded links. Like if you bring up an email that's in a web browser with Mail Viewer, usually they use a URL that's got the link forwarded in a redirect kind of thing, and their web sniffers are programmed to block any redirects because that's a technique used by nefarious people sometimes. So usually if you look at the link itself, you can figure out what the actual link is and then cut and paste that into your browser address, and it'll come up.
I've seen that many times with Outlook. When there's a web address embedded in an email, it'll say blocked and then the website, and you have to pull that out. But I haven't had any issues with the website. So right now I'm on CoreNet, and if I go to one of these embedded SurveyMonkey practice exercises like calculating energy of psych chart processes. So I only got a couple of these up, but here's an example. It's just like the other one where it's asking you to use the psych chart. And as you click through the buttons here, I've never had of the bugs that I've seen, none of them have been related to using SurveyMonkey, and which is important because, like I said at the end of the presentation, I think a lot of the value is in having a way, SurveyMonkey is just one of many web survey programs and companies out there, but I think using that technology and that approach can yield very important and powerful things for a teacher to be able to use.
Okay. Someone says that they got blocked in the URL for this course. It just went around by removing the word. Yeah, that often happens. Usually what I try to do is when I'm putting in URLs for things, most browsers, like Internet Explorer, will recognize if you put the slashes backwards or forwards after HTTP, but the block seems to only put the blocked word in there if it hasn't forwards. So I'll put the slashes backwards so that if people cut and paste it into their browser, it'll work without having the block get stuck in there. But sometimes HIT gets on to me and figures out how I'm evading their blocked stuff. In fact, usually I have to send out the announcements for these webinars in several small chunks because otherwise their systems interpret it as spam and block it. So anyway, I digress. So we have a few more minutes, maybe a couple more questions. If anybody has any other questions or comments out there. Again, that's www.rcxuniversity.org. RCX University, all one word. .org if you can't see the screen. And it looks like an excellent resource. I want to thank Brian for sharing with us and for all the work he's done. It looks like an incredible amount of work has gone into this. Again, thank you very much, Brian, and thank everybody for joining us today.
Thanks, everybody.